Good morning, Bitcoiners. How are you on this fine, bright, sunny morning? The sun up, no problem. Bitcoin, it's the same. It's just doing great. We love it. It's just doing great. Predictable. The world's so unpredictable around us. The sun and Bitcoin, just as predictable as they've been for however long now. We don't know. So all that's left for us plebs to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. The Great Awakening is upon us, my friends. The Great Awakening. Can you feel it? People are waking up everywhere, right? We got lots of people asking questions that we're really happy they're asking, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, as you know, we like to find the fakest news we can find. It's a fun activity, right? It's Moscow time, everyone. So, the city of Newark, New Jersey, did something pretty fun. You know, we like to see virtue signaling out there, especially with governments and bureaucracies. And as you know, we talk regularly here about how in federalism, it's not the A team is the federal institutions and the B team is the state institutions. But in practice, IQ levels, talent levels, all that stuff, it kind of does work out that way. And in that logic, the C team, right, the relegated lowest IQ participants in that whole democratic edifice you see in front of you are the municipal governments. I mean, they're the lowest performers, let's say, right? That's why they got to go and get these small, super corrupted. We can all admit now the corruption in city governments is not because there's bad people that got a bunch of stuff done. The corruption came from a simple reality. No one gives a shit, and no one voted in these. So anyone who can organize can win, right? It's just organization. And guess who's the most organized? Crime. Crime is really organized, right? They know what they're doing. They know how to get people to vote. They know how to incentivize people to vote. And that's what's led to our cities being so riddled with corruption. I saw it firsthand growing up in Montreal, and Montreal, for my entire youth, was one of the most corrupted places you could imagine. I mean, just it didn't mean there was no violence, but nothing got built. Everything that did get built was crap and fell apart. And you had very predictable elections in the sense that whoever the mafia backed usually won, right? That was just it. Luckily, in the 2000s, there was a huge inquiry about public corruption because an overpass, a bit of concrete fell. And, it was pretty bad. And what it ended up producing was mayors getting arrested and a type of cleanup of corruption. Now, I don't know exactly what's going on with the corruption, but what I've seen since that is infrastructure boom in Montreal. It's amazing. They've built trains, they've built new subway stations, all kinds of stuff coming online, a brand new bridge. I mean, really amazing stuff, right? So some places have figured out, but apparently Newark, New Jersey did not. So they did a whole big ceremony and got a sister city with a place that is called, I will tell you the name of this place. It is called, where did I find it? It's a Hindu nation, they say, right? So it's a Hindu nation. But the problem is it doesn't exist. There's no such place. No one, no, the CBS headline, CBS is even covering and having a good laugh, right? So if you're getting mocked by the fake news, you did something wrong. So here, the city of Newark falls for sister city scam. Whose job it was to do a simple Google search. So they didn't do it. But the funny part is, they actually held a ceremony, a sister city signing ceremony. It didn't work out for them. So that's what's going on in Newark, New Jersey. Another amazing piece of fake news that comes to us from it's Daniel Princey SOV. I was on his podcast a little while ago, Once Bitten. It was a great podcast. He's a great guy. He's big into homeschooling, and he mentioned this because of the homeschooling connection. So it turns out that Kraft Heinz Lunchables are going to be part of the National School Lunch Program this fall. So Kraft is going to be selling or giving or doing whatnot. I don't know, their turkey and cheddar cracker stackers, their extra cheesy pizza cracker stackers, And they've created a whole bunch of new ones for the 2023-2024 school year. And so they get to give this stuff to kids. So Daniel Prince says, just another reason to homeschool. And he also does mention to Modern T-Man and the Texas Beef Initiative that it's genocide. I don't know about genocide, but it's pretty bad stuff. And I don't know if you guys knew the connection to this, but John Kerry, you guys know who John Kerry is? He ran for president against George Bush Jr. And lost. And then he became Obama's, I think, Secretary of State for a while. And now he's the climate envoy of Joe Biden. And I don't know if any of you caught it, but Thomas Massey, he was in, what's his name? John Kerry. So John Kerry is the heir to the Kraft fortune, right? He is the heir to the Kraft empire. And well, his wife is, and then he's got his hands on it. So he was testifying in Congress about the climate change thing the other day. And Thomas Massey, who we've mentioned a few times on the show, is one of the highest IQ members, if we do think in terms of the A team and the B team. I mentioned that in terms of power, that there isn't an A team, B team. In reality and in IQ output and in capacity, there's a certain, not that there's great quality at the federal level. There's like 10 people who are capable of talking out in public, and that's about it. But they're mostly in the lines of the fella Heinz. Kraft Heinz is the same company. James, Kraft Heinz is the same company. There is no such thing as Kraft. Heinz owns it. James is mentioning here Heinz. I think he married a Heinz. His wife is Heinz, but they own Kraft. So that's the same company. So so Thomas Massey was questioning this, failed presidential candidate, failed Secretary of State, John Kerry, and said, because John Kerry's there to talk about the environment and all that stuff. And Thomas Massey asked him what kind of a university degree he had. And he said, something like political science or some kind of humanities degree. And Thomas Massey, MIT trained, we have to mention MIT trained, said, "Oh, I'm so happy that a pseudoscience degree holder is here talking to us about pseudoscience." And of course, John Kerry says, "Oh, what are you talking about? What am I doing here? Is this serious? Is this guy for real?" But of course, it's now gone viral. Everyone having a good laugh. But just seeing the questioning of a degree and someone who has this kind of a track record in a public forum like that, in the midst of all the corruption we see around us, in the midst of everything that's going on with the war in Ukraine, with all of this sort of really dark messaging around censorship and all of do we even know anymore what's going on with Fauci? The stuff that's coming out is super disturbing, right? And no one's talking about it. And when we're talking about Fauci, we mean the stuff in the 90s and the 2000s where he was doing gain of function in America for new viruses, and then some did get out. And then that's the reason why he went to the biolabs in Wuhan and in Ukraine, because there was heat on him in America, so he had to export the research and all this. Now, again, we continue to think fog of war is all around Fauci. And the thing that is most disturbing about the new allegations is that no one's talking about it, right? It's just not out there. Now, that could just mean that it's fake, right? If no one talks about it, my litmus test is usually fake, because you'd imagine that Fox or one of these folks would be on top of it. Just a second. So you'd think that someone would be on the Fauci thing from some news. I haven't seen much out there. So we're going to continue to wait around it. But the important thing is it's bringing up big questions, right? So it's bringing up big new lines of thinking. And even just watching Massey grill John Kerry is something you wouldn't have seen just a few years ago, or even a few weeks ago, perhaps. So it made me think of this context of an awakening. We can all feel this awakening, as I mentioned at the beginning, right? And we often use a Jungian frame to talk about psychological states. Of course, yesterday's show, the day before, For anyone new out there, we like to talk about psychology here because we're deep into the Austrian school of looking at economics. And even though we are dealing with economics, usually taught, usually discussed in terms of finance and numbers and science and math, right? We don't talk about any of that stuff. That's a Keynesian way of looking at economics. We embrace the psychological aspects here of the economy and do think that the best way to describe an economy is as a psychological engine that can either perpetuate forward or stutter and stop and stall and fall apart, right? And currently we are in the stutter, stop, fall apart part of the American economic psychological engine. It ain't working, right? We get towns that are signing deals with fake places. We get Lunchables being distributed in our schools and all the marketing that comes around with it. And we get the guy who profits from the Lunchables being marketed in schools telling us that we've got major environmental problems and we need to give him more money and his ideas more money and his solutions more airtime. But what we find now is that more and more people are finding themselves, especially with the economic trouble that's happened in the last 2 weeks, right? Seeing this economic trouble, having people immersed not only in the quagmire of banks going down and now the politicization. I can't say that word, guys. I don't know what's wrong with my capacity to say that word. I struggle with it every time. With politics entering economic discussions, it looks like that subject is going to become just as divided, just as blue and red as every other subject because it gets turned and brought into the meat grinder that is the American political system, which will gravitate towards extremes in order to have more leverage to fight, right? That's really the currency. It's the capacity to fight. And that's what everyone is seeking. They want the zinger, they want the dunk on the other guy, and that's what you're sort of after most of the time. So when you think of a process of awakening, it kind of looks like this. It starts with a dark night of the soul, which is what we've been in America since the financial crisis, I would say. We regularly go back further to talk about when some of these insidious forces entered the system. It could be World War II. It could be 1964 with the assassination of the president and all the stuff that happened right after. Just a second again. Sorry about that, team. Kids are playing in the next room, just a little loud this morning, but we got other rooms. They can go in those other rooms, so I just had to get them over there. So, this dark night of the soul thing is sort of where we've been for quite a while since the meltdown, and of course, Bitcoiners were the first to recognize this and to understand the problems. They inherited a lot of information from the cypherpunks who had been fighting this fight for a while and had been saying that the key is to create cryptographically secure money. And once that integration happened of the political libertarian folks and the cypherpunks, you had some magic and you had some solution to the dark night of the soul. People finally had an answer. It wasn't just invest more time in the political system and try to subvert this political system from inside. You started seeing that the organizing principle of money itself had a lot to do with where we were at as a society and where we were at as a culture. And once that was expressed, you had plenty of people like myself who abandoned the political edifice because there was no answer there. In a psychoanalytical sense, unlike this, the idea was the mind can't heal the mind. Politics can't heal politics. They are the same problem. You're just adding more fuel to the fire when you try to use these institutions to get to the change that you want to see. Now, it doesn't mean we abandon them, right? We're in a time of change and things are changing. And for me personally, there was no more reason to be involved in politics, but I understand why some people are. But the answers were no longer there. So it was natural for myself and for other people and for many of you, I would imagine, to start pursuing what it meant to be a Bitcoiner in order to solve some of these problems, in order to get rid of this dark night of the soul. And that's a way to understand everything that's going on around us right now, right? Like, look at the darkness descending, even when we look at the rumors around Signature Bank that it was targeted because it had these crypto rails, right? We see from radar hits that prosecutors were investigating Signature's bank relationship with the crypto industry before regulators shut it down last weekend. And this is what Nick Carter had predicted, that Choke Point 2.0 would be in full effect. Now, Choke Point, the original, was to use the IRS and the banking system by the Obama administration to attack political opponents and perform a choke point on money, right? The same thing that was done to the truckers in Canada, goaded on by Mark Carney, the biggest financial loser in the history of the world, if we're talking about losses of a fund size for ESG, which he had at 150 trillion at one point, and now it's down to about 50 trillion committed. So there you go. It's it's part of the whole formula here. So but we don't know what to make of that, right? There's just this confusing fog of war that's descended on most things, right? There's a confusing fog of war that has descended on most things. Even look at this thing that everyone's talking about this morning. There was a American drone over the Black Sea and a Russian jet knocked it down. Now, both sides have released what looks like deepfake AI video of the incident, and you can't tell, right? You can't tell what really happened there. People talking about it, people arguing about it, but it's part of the fog of war, and that's sort of what we're all steeped in right now, is this fog of war. And it makes it very difficult to have conversations. But there's good news. Here's one thing that I think, and you can really see that the political bubbles that people are in help maintain this fog of war and help maintain people getting stuck in this dark night of the soul. But there is some good news, and I do mean this sincerely. In the presidential stable on the Democrat side, you've got the Marianne Williamson running again. Now, people make fun of her because she's spiritual and she says kind of flaky things, and she's not serious like it's not serious like John Kerry with his degree, right? But here's what Pirate Wires wrote about her, that Marianne Williamson, this is River Page, writing for Pirate Wires, Mike Solana, who we will have at Bitcoin 2023. It's not public yet, but you'll see the announcement shortly. Marianne Williamson is the most charismatic woman to ever run for president and the first since Jimmy Carter to convincingly believe in God. She's going to make Biden sweat. And I thought she was a credible candidate back in the last primary the Democrats had. You remember she ran in the 2020 lead up. And I thought she was pretty credible then. I would meet her volunteers regularly in New York City. They were always pleasant people. I told them regularly, I'm for Trump, but she's not so bad. And they respected that. And it was one of the rare instances where you saw Democrats kind of like Trump. And Trump was sort of welcoming of her presence in the debate and welcoming of the sort of strands she brought. And I thought she had the same capacity as Trump already then. She's kind of a reality bender, and she says things you're not used to hearing. She definitely doesn't speak off the same script that the robot Joe Biden said. And remember, it's one of the greatest things that the fiat system, based on words and speaking and marketing and projection of confidence and power, has to now rely on Joe Biden to get itself going, right? That's another, I mean, it's a excellent way to find yourself, to pull yourself out of the dark night of the soul. Once you see those images, once you see that the system is relying on Joe Biden to speak confidently, project confidence, and therefore engage the psychological engine behind the US dollar and the US system to perpetuate forward. It's one of the great all-time tricks that have ever been played, right? that the system now relies on this guy. It's like, be careful what you ask for, because you get it sometimes. And these guys bent the rules, begged and pleaded, and scammed people like Marianne Williamson. Remember, the primaries in the Dem Party have been in the bag and have been hoaxy for years. Hillary shouldn't have probably won the 2016 nomination. It was because they screwed Bernie Sanders. They screwed Bernie again in 2020. You know, Trump always would goad on Bernie Sanders to say the truth about what happened to him, because the machine had excluded him and picked a winner each and every time. And we saw it with the same kind of shenanigans and democracy fortification that happened in Arizona, at the national level, in the 2020 election, in the midterms. We saw that already in the Dem primaries. So that's been there for a while. But here, someone who is capable of speaking about the world in these spiritual terms, I think can do a great service. I'm not saying she's going to win. The whole thing is super scammy, right? So you can't really predict who's going to win on the Dem side, nor really on the Republican side, except Trump is very powerful there. But it is a super scammy process. The Republicans have a much more open nomination and primary process than the Dems. I think that's a matter of fact, right? Maybe I'm wrong. But what we see is that someone who's capable of speaking that way can bring a lot of people to the next level, which is the questioning time, right? Which is to get people to question everything around them. And that's happening on its own. Again, with Biden and that ridiculous speech that I've been referencing for a while, right? That I assure you the system is secure, right? So that just watching him fail to put a sentence together and then watching him do the shuffle, right? The way he walks, I continue to think is one of the most important things. He has the Alzheimer's dementia walk. And when he gets to the door, you could see he can't even really figure out how to open the door, right? He can't even figure out how to open the door. Right? He doesn't know what he's doing, right? So that's a big part of it. And then yesterday, now that we're getting to this questioning part here, there was some great questioning just yesterday. We had Jerome Powell again testifying, and one of the congresswomen asked him about the 2% inflation target. Right. So this was not someone who's out to destroy him and someone who's out to be mean to Jerome Powell. She just said, explain where the 2% comes from in the first place. Of course, he can't do it, right? He stutters. It's all about, and he says what we talk about on this show. He admits it openly. What we talk about on this show. It's not math, right? He has said that central bankers around the world have accepted that expectations are what bring you to that point. If there's an expectation of 5% inflation, you're probably going to get the 5% inflation. They've accepted that. And they think his best answer was 2% is what we all think is great. And it's a predictable number, and we need to get there because of this psychological engine having something to moor itself to orient itself towards and to target. So it's a target because you need a target is more or less what he said. But Saifedean, and everyone waiting to see this answer. It wasn't just Bitcoiners that were making fun of this yesterday. Across the board, people were making fun of stuttering Jerome Powell's answer about 2% that looked like a car salesman trying to scam you, right? So Saifedean says, fiat economics, it's such a silly pseudoscience. Its high priests want you to believe that what you think of inflation matters more than the quantity of money they create to enrich their cartel bosses. And indeed, the psychological engine of changing the denominator, as what I always say, changing the numeraire, changing the money by which all other money is measured by, is a main problem. Okay, so that's why I consistently use the analogy of Bitcoin being for the economy what water is for the metric system. So water for the metric system is really simple. Water for the metric system is the foundation of the metric system simply because its properties are consistent. And all that meant was the following. They said it boils at this temperature, make that 100. It freezes at this temperature, make that 0. And from there, they extrapolate the entire metric system. Volume becomes distance, right? So the 1 liter is 1 liter of water at ideal conditions. And from there, you can create meters, centimeters, everything that came after that. So the usefulness of the metric system is that it's consistent, right? It doesn't just change. Yeah, 1 liter equals 1 kilogram. Exactly. So Bitcoin Graffiti says 1 liter equals 1 kilogram. It's simply a basis that we can all agree on that is consistent and universal around the world, therefore is useful to create a measurement system out of. And I believe that, right? I'm a fan of the metric system. I don't want to go and change what people know and say, oh, you got to use metric and not imperial. We learn both in Canada, so I had an advantage. I'm not so handy with inches and some stuff sometimes, but I know what I'm talking about. And physically, because of American sports, most people understand their size physically in the imperial system. I know how tall I am. I know how much I weigh in imperial numbers. So I'm 6'2". I weigh like 180 something pounds. So we know from that, how to measure ourselves. I know it in centimeters. I wouldn't say it to someone. If someone said, "How tall are you?" I wouldn't say I'm 185 centimeters, right? I would say I'm 6'1", 6'2", something like that. So so the measurement of it is really important, and that is psychologically what Bitcoin offers. What the Fed Chair Powell is not saying here is that, right? When you change the numeraire, when you change the denominator, when you change the foundation by which all other aspects of the economy are measured, you break the whole system. And I've said for a long time that all research done on Wall Street, when people would question me about the volatility of Bitcoin, right? So I do a lot of these, talk to some people about Bitcoin in a private setting, and what about volatility? And I'd always turn it on them. I'd say, well, volatility maybe. But remember, because of quantitative easing, because of inflation, because of the properties of the US dollar being contrived, what ends up happening is all the research you guys have ever done, all of it, all the research that came out of Wall Street, all of it from 2020 and before is garbage. It's useless, right? Because the numbers change. So your projections can't stay consistent. Whereas Bitcoiners, we're on schedule, right? The worst of our research is like the stock to flow model of plan B, and it's not that far off, right? Now, I was never a plan B guy. I was never a stock to flow guy or any of those things. But the projections of Bitcoin and the predictions of Bitcoin researchers are right on cue. I mean, everything that I wrote about Bitcoin inside of CoinDesk from 2015, 2016, 2017 still looks pretty useful. Like it's not useless. It continues to be predictive. It continues to be a fairly accurate assessment of where we're at today. So when we talk about volatility, imagine if we say all of your research, all of the things you've ever done are just garbage. The whole industry. I mean, how many people do research on Wall Street and you can actually just dismiss it all? It's all useless, right? All of it is useless. There isn't one good thing left because the numbers changed. So what ended up happening here is that that brought a lot of people to questioning, right? Bitcoin and the destabilization of the Wall Street system of money brought a lot of people to those questions. And that's why the questioning of Jerome Powell here is interesting, because it's going to get more people to start talking about what's going on. And it should bring more people out of this dark night of the soul, because once they realize that the politicians are only a symptom of the problem, right? Now that the politicization of the economy is becoming at the forefront, and it's not just what do you think about trans and what do you think about the environment and what do you think about marriage rights and all these other things. Now that it's just about the economy, we're more squarely on the psychological engine that perpetuates things forward. We're more over the target than we've ever been. And that's why you get some pretty interesting takes on what the central banks are doing right now. So you get, and it's all about this confidence. So Northman Trader has a pretty good breakdown of what's gone on here, right? And about credibility and about leading us to this period of questioning, which is a major part of the awakening that we're experiencing, right? We need more people to start questioning, to admit that they're in this dark night of the soul, that they're in this twilight of what's going on in the world, right? You awaken just after that period, right? So here's what he says. Sven Henrik, who spoke at Bitcoin 2022 in Amsterdam, central banks, after blowing the inflation call, piled into rate hikes to save their credibility, but neglected to assess the lag effects along the way. And now some of these are blowing up in everybody's face. Well done again. The worst part of all of this is that the lag effects are still filtering through, and hence things will obviously still get worse on the growth front. But recessions happen fast once confidence is lost. Again, it is a psychological engine. And like Jerome Powell admitted, right, confidence is a big part of it. Confidence just took a crowbar to the face, is what Sven Hendrik says, right? A crowbar to the face. I like it. How will they restore confidence? I think this is the key question the Fed and the European Central Bank must be asking themselves right now. Do you want to risk blowing everything up to save face and lose even more face in the process? This is ego management that we talk about all the time as one of the triggers of the dark night of the soul, right? Once the ego has that much wobbliness, once it is in that much of a question, once the confidence in the structure supporting ego break down, you're into the dark night, right? You're into trouble, right? You're into dealing with your shadow and dealing with what's going on. And that's why I've created this shadow image here, right? Because that's where we're at. So what he asks then is, or do you do what's right from a policy perspective? Admit that you got blindsided again and try to do what's necessary to keep things from blowing up and causing another major crisis and an immediate large-scale recession. From my perch, they need to let go of their self-perceived credibility issues and do what's right. Before throwing more gasoline on the fire, perhaps stop. Immediately figure out the status of the blaze. That means to stop rate hikes and pause QT and backstop liquidity. Worry about inflation later. Inflation is already coming down, and the events of the past week into today are likely to kill it off anyways. A recession will do that every time, but you can't risk a systemic event, which is front and center right now, and nothing is more of a systemic risk than the financial sector freezing up. Indeed, what is going on over in Europe this morning? Well, let's go see what's going on in Europe this morning. We've got Credit Suisse getting killed. That's normal, right? And now the Saudi National Bank has said we're not going to give any support. It looks like the Swiss national system might be tapped. They have a ton of money, so that's fine. But there's more trouble, right? There's more trouble. You get the banks in England, Europe getting just hammered this morning. Let me find those numbers here. Let me see if I copied them. Let me see if I copied those numbers. The banks in England, let me find the, yeah, here we go. We get stock markets down 3% in Germany, 4% in France, 4% in Spain. Trading is stopped on BNB Paribas, another major bank stock, right? They're down 8%. So we're getting a lot of these moments around Europe where it looks like the contagion is spreading. Now, what Northman Trader is saying here is that if they don't manage their egos, if the central bankers don't manage their egos and don't do what's right, you're going to get more people stuck in this aspect here, right? Because recession will spread. What's the best way to get people to be in a dark night? Well, unemployed, hungry, right? Stressed out, right? That will lead you to questioning. It won't fix everyone's problems. Of course, there's some people who will just complain and sit in the dark night and wait for someone to help them. Right? That's a part of the predictable response here. But you're going to get a lot of people who start questioning. You're going to get a lot of people who start wondering. John Kerry's got a degree in liberal arts, and he's telling me about energy policy. You get a guy like Joe Biden who can't say a statement or open a door or walk across a room or take a question, and he's the one trying to project confidence in the economy, right? Now, as Bitcoiners know, there's all kinds of questions now about election credibility and about infrastructure, safety. All kinds of things are breaking down. It's not just the economy. It's almost everything our grandparents built. It's almost everything we built after World War II that is falling apart before our eyes. Can they fix it all? Can the guy who can't walk across the room fix it all? No, right? Those systems can't fix this. And it's going to lead more people to questioning, right? And from there, right, once you start the questioning, you'll move into the world of pursuit. So I'm trying to draw the chakras here, and this is supposed to be someone who's kind of meditating. I don't know if you can see all of the chakras and the pursuit of your own personal health, right? So that's where things begin to change. In order to deal with the economy as it is right now, deal with all the questions that are going on. It's something Bitcoiners embraced heavily at the start of the 2020 pandemic, right? What did Bitcoiners retreat to in the 2020 pandemic? They retreated to healthy living, food wise, right? I mean, a lot of Bitcoiners, myself included, we knew about the dieting and the carnivore. We liked the steak, but it was a bit of fashion. I can't speak for everyone, right? But I wasn't 100% consistent. I lived in New York City. I was still eating out all the time. I've been over drinking for quite a while now, so that wasn't really part of my life anymore. But the idea that, and I exercised, I would go to the gym, but not every day. I wasn't that consistent because priorities, work, job, normal stuff, got to go here, got to meet someone, got to go see what's happening in Midtown because someone invited me and it's a great steakhouse and all these kinds of things, right? Distraction, distraction, distraction. When the lockdown happened, most Bitcoiners went into this pursuit of their own personal health. And we had the information in front of us, so it wasn't that hard. We had been talking about this stuff for years. But how many Bitcoiners said, well, I'm going to buy a farm, I'm going to buy a homestead, I'm going to start living simply, I'm not going to live in a city anymore, I'm going to do things like this, I'm going to do things like that. It became pretty pervasive. And because Bitcoin performed like all of these assets did during the lockdowns and the money printing, it became attainable for many Bitcoiners. So that's part of how this pursuit worked. But now, right, we saw that the game is changing. Right, we see all the psyops, and it's becoming more and more difficult to get through the fog of war, and more people seem to be lost in this area, even though Bitcoiners are kind of moving away from there. And thinking about those things. But here's the big thing, right? Chat GPT-4 came out yesterday. Now I know there are demons inside the machine, just as there's likely going to be angels. It's not all good with AI. I personally have never predicted it would be all good, especially that we have this centralized product coming out that seems woke regularly, right? We can all acknowledge that it's got politics infused because it's learned from the systems that we've already built, right? All of our AI now has learned from Twitter and other messaging services and things like that. So it's not quite there. And I do believe that the capacity for, let's call it, decentralization, right? The conversation around decentralization because of Bitcoin is growing and growing and growing and becoming more and more important, right? So I think that you're going to see this conversation about decentralization graft itself onto AI because of confidence in where its knowledge comes from, confidence in what language it was used to teach it. So I continue to believe that we're going to have a type of gelling, a symbiosis between people and AI as we go forward. And one of those things is that you'll have your own pet AI because you'll have confidence in it, because you'll teach it, and you'll be the one who helps guide its progress and guide its growth. So here's what's going on, right? We've got Machiavelli's Underbelly. Yes, Machiavelli. I think he was kicked off of when he was Machiavelli's Underbelly Twitter, but I forget why. Too many deep fakes, perhaps. But here he is. He asked, and this is my prediction, right? This is my prediction when it comes to questioning and pursuit, this element here, and getting out of the dark night of the soul. It's that AI is going to help us as a reference, as a feedback tool in order to block ourselves and protect ourselves from fake news. Now, I understand it sounds crazy because some of these AI are spitting out fake news all the time. But here's just an example, right, of Chat GPT-4. Yes, Machiavelli asked, did Donald Trump call Nazis fine people? So the statement says this. The statement you are referring to is often attributed to President Trump in the context of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in August 2017. During the rally, white nationalists, white supremacists, and neo-Nazis clashed with counter-protesters, resulting in the tragic death of a counter-protester. In response to the events, President Trump made several statements. One of these statements including the phrase, very fine people on both sides. Critics of Trump argue that he was referring to white supremacists and neo-Nazis when he made this statement. However, supporters of Trump claimed that he was referring to people on both sides of the debate over the removal of Confederate statues, not the extremist present at the rally. It is essential to note that the same press conference, Trump did condemn white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and the KKK. However, The fine people comment remains a subject of controversy and debate, with different interpretations depending on one's political perspective. But Machiavelli doesn't let him get away with that. He says, that sounds very wishy-washy. Reduce this to a single yes or no. Chat GPTC. No, Donald Trump did not directly call Nazis fine people. However, his very fine people on both sides comment has been subject to controversy and debate due to its content. A yes or no will suffice, Machiavelli asks again. No. No. He said no. Finally, ChatGPT said no. So one of the great hoaxes, and it is the prime hoax. It is the hoax from which all other hoaxes are derived in the case of Trump, right? That has been the biggest albatross, the biggest weight on Trump as a presidential candidate. It's the rhetorical kill shot. Fine people, very fine people, right? And it's very difficult when you see the manipulated video that allowed this to happen in the first place by Aaron Rupar. In case anyone is wondering, it was Aaron Rupar who did this. He is the hoax architect of this thing, who is also getting just dragged by Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald these days. I don't know if you guys are paying attention to that. This should help us with the dark night of the soul and questioning. They continue to say, because he was saying that Matt Taibbi isn't, he was cheering on Matt Taibbi getting pounded by congressmen last week, that he's not a real journalist, not pounded, but laughably attacked. And of course, Rupar cheered it on, right? And everyone who's real journalists said Aaron Rupar, who's not a journalist, who just clips video and sits at his house and has never had a source and never had to do the actual job, is there doing this stuff. So that's where we're at, right? So from there, you can start seeing the ability of all of us to question is going to become greater. And our pursuit of answers, our pursuit of forms of stability that come from this questioning are going to get supported by these new tools and by communities. That's one of the great things about Bitcoin communities, is that much of our work is actually here in this pursuit aspect, right? Bitcoin, once you understand the simplicity of Bitcoin, once you get your mind around the architecture and the orchestration of the technologies, you quickly move into the world of time preference. You quickly move into this psychological engine that I'm talking about. And now the psychological engine requires you to be healthy physically, right? That's a big part of the psychological engine. That's why there's so much attention paid to not being a dopamine addict, to having a better time preference, to eating healthy, and to not buying into some of this crap marketing around food and the dopamine that comes with it. So it's a big, big thing that this is happening, right? It's a major difference and a sign that things are moving forward. Now, it's not quite enough, though, right? There's more to it than just questioning and pursuit. This merger piece is a big part of it, and that's where events of just this week. Now, this is one of the most interesting weeks in the history of the world. Right? It's just unbelievable what's going on. You get the bank crash. You're getting all of this stuff last week, of course, with Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger. In many ways, the veil fully coming off of the regime, in the sense that we're seeing explicit lies, total disregard for argument, and even positioning, just straight up lying in order to perhaps save the day, or perhaps reinstill confidence, as people are talking about with Jerome Powell. But it goes throughout the system, right? They're all sort of tied. But here's the great news, right? Here's what's happening. Here is merger in one word. It's happening in two levels. So at once, you're starting to hear more and more discussion about the Chinese yuan settled oil trades. You're seeing more and more. Purpose towards what Saudi is doing. China involving itself in the peace process around Iran and Saudi and the war in Yemen. China getting more involved in what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Now, again, we are not here to support any political structure. We are here to support a change in economics. And because there is this new position for the Chinese money, it heavily weakens US dollar demand around the world. Not that I say it's going to disappear overnight, but people might, because they don't want to import American psychological instability through the money into their countries, why should they have to bother with that, right? So you could start to see people fence themselves off from American bipolarization and American derangement, psychological and economic derangement. And that is changing American options and the levers that someone like Jerome Powell can pull on. And what that ends up leading us to is what's it going to look like after this? If America can't take the role, is it going to be China? Of course, China has created all of its own psychological dark nights of the soul. I can't imagine what some people in China are having to go through, right? I mean, imagine the psyops over there. Imagine they're still rounding up people who they caught protesting COVID lockdowns back in January. They're still going after some of those people who just showed up, right? So they got their own troubles. Russia too, right? Everyone fly. I love how in Russia, people just fly out of a window and they don't even they don't explain. That person jumped out of a window. That person jumped out of a window. It's not like in America when there's suicided and they still try to paint a picture that someone was suicided. You heard about this Clinton lawyer that I don't know anything about it, but that he was bound and gagged and they ruled it a suicide, right? Okay. So it's just funny that when you see these references in Russia, they just throw them out the window and that everybody knows what happened, right? So we don't want anything like that, right? We're not into those kinds of violent things. But here's what's going on. The head of the Texas electrical grid, right? So this just happened a few days ago. Despite all the craziness that's going on. Remember, Texas is the most energy abundant place in the world, right? They have the best energy policies, the best energy matrix, the best energy system. Now, it's not the system of the future. It's still quite centralized. It's still different than I think we're going to see on a Bitcoin standard, is I guess what I'm saying. But here's what the head of the Texas electrical grid, Brad Jones, explained. That Bitcoin mining is helping to balance our grid and is driving more renewables into the system. Right? That's what he said. And documenting Bitcoin underlined that the Bitcoin energy debate is over when he shared that tweet. Now, what merger ends up looking like, right, is all of this dark night of the soul and all the wars over energy, all of the wars over money and how it's bound to energy through the war machine, through the propaganda machine, are falling apart, right? They might have made sense 80 years ago, this orchestration of war machine, corporate energy entities, and the political entities in order to conjure up confidence and project a path to the future. But what we see with this merger now is that as Bitcoin continues to drive into the energy realm, as it continues to become the metric, right? We just talked about Saudi and new markets for oil and new money that you can use to buy and sell oil. That whole thing is falling apart, right? It's not going to make it. So the reference rate for energy will be proof of work. It will be the integration of Bitcoin into the energy systems, and then as a psychological reference to talk about the economy. It'll be the only thing we can agree on, right? Now that politics have entered the economy to the extent that they have, and squarely in the economy, not things around the economy, not spending and taxing. I mean, the economy, the banks, money itself. Now that money itself is explicitly politicized after everything that happened in the last week, the avenue for Bitcoin is now wide open to be the psychological reference for the energy systems in the world, which will allow the energy systems to perpetuate forward, to build more capacity, and on a global level to bring a merger about that will allow all kinds of people to skip some of the questioning and lessen that, because it was a bigger burden for everyone who's been involved in it earlier, right? Because we're not quite there and the division is greater and all of these things. But this could help usher in a full migration of people into a world where they can now easily understand the economy. They can easily understand money. They don't have to wait around for people like Jerome Powell to explain it to them. They don't have to wait around for more testimony in Congress. They don't have to get inspired by shufflefoot dementia Joe Biden. They can just look at very simple numbers, very simple systems, and understand if the world is doing well or not. Right? That's what you can't tell right now. All right, let's see some of these quotes. Lots of quotes today. Let me get to them. Let me get to all these. Yeah, they feared her truthfulness last election style. Yeah, I think so. It forced her out of the debates. Yeah, they made fun of her for being flaky and all that. But again, because she's keeping people who we have to have empathy for and pity, the people who are most caught up in the Democrat manufacturing of thought, manufacturing of opinion machine, the psyop machine that runs both political parties, but you got to have a little more sympathy in some ways, even though they can be mean and nasty. Sympathy for the Democrats because they know not what they do, right? They know not what they do. They still think the New York Times is telling the truth. I mean, imagine being in that position in life that you've been told your whole life the New York Times is the paper of record, and you actually believe what it says. Now, we don't have to have empathy and sympathy for them because it is so blatantly a lie right now, and it would take not much to start questioning. But nevertheless, there's enough of them there that you got to kind of give them an excuse. But that's where she can be a big effect. I don't think she's going to win or anything like that, right? I just mean having these conversations, being able to talk to Democrats about God again, right? Like, and about maybe there's things that universities can't teach you. Maybe there's things you don't just get endowed with because you got a university degree, right? That maybe John Kerry and his Kraft Heinz fortune, he's not really trying to sell you on the good stuff, right? So there you go. Forced her out of the debates. Yeah, they did. I really love Jill Stein. She talked about the ranked choice vote and not having to vote your fears, which is the whole problem with the popular vote. Yeah, was she the Green candidate again? Yeah. Keep missing the start of the show. Sorry, Boo Bodacious. Yeah, if you're not on U.S. time, so I kept it consistent to U.S. time. The show where I am, there is no time change, but it was important to keep the show at the same time. So if you were in a place that didn't have a time change, then you got screwed. I had to do it earlier, which I was doing it at 9 a.m. my time, which I don't really like. I prefer to the 8 a.m. My energy is just a little better, a little less time to prep, but I don't really need too much time to prep. So there you go. They chained her to the bench and arrested her for wanting to participate in the events. Did they arrest her? Really? I don't remember that. But I believe it. Yeah, I believe it. He totally got Alzheimer's. Yeah. He's a sundowner, man. It's pretty bad. But again, I personally take pleasure watching him fail. I do. I mean, you don't want to embrace Schadenfreude too much, and that's where, speaking of demons and AI demons, you don't want to take too much pleasure in it. But he asked for it, and it's one of these things where you did all this stuff to be the leader of the free world, so go do it. Go be the leader of the free world, Joe. Make a sentence. Speak words. Inspire us. Inspire America. Right? It's great. The idea is absurd, and that's what makes it so funny. Right? Yeah, 1 liter equals 1 kilogram, precisely. Yeah. Fiat-based money, it was brainwashed people. The money and economy becomes crisis-based. Yeah, that is my worry, that they can amp up the crisis to keep people from questioning. They can make the dark night of the soul much more of a pit. Aliens would build a measurement system based on the gravitational constant of the Earth. Yeah, it could be. Any thoughts on how Sats 1 kilo of beef will cost on a Bitcoin standard? I don't know about that. Hard to say where we end up. But here's the thing, though. it will be driven down the prices of things. That's one of the major differences between a Bitcoin standard and a fiat standard. We've all got lost in the capacity of capitalism to learn efficiencies, share those in the system, and make things cheaper for us. We got more shit and junk. We got that. We got to consume more. But we didn't really learn about shared practices, shared best practices, which can help lessen the cost of things. So I anticipate the cost of beef will go up in sats faster than the price of Bitcoin going up in some ways. I do expect it as we transition from industrial farming to local farming, that there's going to be, and we're already seeing it, the inflation in beef and the inflation in the cost of good food. So, but I think going forward, it will all come down. I mean, once we're on a Bitcoin standard, we're going to find ways to do this that are more peaceful, more pleasurable. Maybe more people have cows, and that brings the cost down because more people don't even pay. They can have ruminants around them, or all that. I know I could probably raise, like, on my property, probably like 10 cows. Can I eat more than a cow for my whole family all year? Right. So, um, um, and that's just mine. If like all the pastures around me got together, and some of them are already raising some beef, we could probably have a huge herd. I've heard before on my farm it was about a 400 cow dairy farm, which is not quite the same thing, but it was all pasture raised. The barn is kind of small for that many, but they were mostly outside, so no big deal. So there you go. I don't know what the answer is though. I don't know. I just think it will go up then come down, I guess is what I'm saying. There we go. Ever diminishing pound per sats. Yes, there we go. Yeah, yes. Thank you for the answer. Where do I sats? Ever diminishing is the short answer. Yeah, ever diminishing. The chakras map into Jungian archetypes from top to bottom. 7, holy man. 6, magician. 5, jester. Yeah, there you go. I didn't know that. This is a very good piece of information, Bitcoin graffiti. Indeed, this is kind of a blend of the Jungian process of individuation, which we've mentioned many times here. That's the encounter, right? So that's kind of a mix of dark night and questioning. That's encounter. And then, of course, merger, and then assimilation, right? Or assimilation, then merge. I don't remember the order now all of a sudden. But the process of individuation looks like that. So it's holy man, magician, jester, trickster, king, warrior, lover, shaman, from thinking to feeling. Yeah, that's it, guys. That's it right there. That's it. Yoga is good for the soul. Yeah. I mean I'm not a I'm a I get the kundalini up, I get the energy. I've been doing that for years, so I have a very good trigger to just send it up. I have been practicing it for almost 20 years now, I guess. Microsoft co-released GPT-4, so it's definitely not safe. Yeah, please never. Whatever I say about AI, I'm only looking for the wisps that I think are going to help us. I understand that the corporate rollout of AI is extremely frightening and not cool when it comes to its wokeness. We don't like it. But that's not the end of the story, right? So there's more to it. James says, I feel like RFK Jr. could be a good candidate because the MIC is so mafia like, and he could get the US to talk about the intelligence state and bot science community. You want to know something that I saw yesterday that's hilarious? You know the QAnon thing? You know the QAnon, which was always fake, right? If everyone was wondering, it was a part of a counter. When you want to run counter operations in these instances, what you do is you create a plausible storyline that sucks people in, the same way the FBI, for example, entrapped those Whitmer kidnappers. That happened in Canada a lot after 9/11, where you'd get the CSIS and RCMP follow around some, low IQ members of every community. Got low IQ members. They found and targeted a few low IQ members of the Muslim community and talked them into being terrorists. That already happened 15 years ago in Canada, and it was astounding when it happened, right? And they had video of these guys like trying to figure out how to do a train derailment, and I mean, just you could tell they're like not all there, right? And the Whitmer case was the same. And QAnon had some of those signs. Now, I don't know anything about the pedo and the Epstein, and I mean that all looks legit, right? Like, what the hell is going on here? Don't know, right? Don't know. Don't care to speculate too much, because you are dealing with poisoned narratives, poisoned lines of inquiry, right? It's not always easy to question. But anyway, the QAnon mythology was the following, right? That JFK Jr. wasn't dead, right? That JFK Jr. wasn't dead, and he was going to come back and be public and run with Trump, right? That was a big part of the QAnon storyline, if you missed it. And wouldn't it be funny if RFK gets blackballed in the Dem process and then has to jump and then Trump takes him as a running mate? You know how funny that would be? I mean, if the simulation indeed does prefer the most entertaining outcome, that's it. I can't think of a more entertaining outcome than the most and the most iconic Democrat family in the world, the Kennedys, jumping over to destroy the Democrats. That would change things, right? That would definitely change things. So I think RFK's role in this is important. I don't know if he wins, although he's when he said he would run, to me, he is a credible Democrat candidate. I really think he is. Just because I think we can have some confidence that he's got some family. He's got some family scores to settle, right? Now, remember, JFK Jr. in 99. Now, I don't know if you guys are, if some people might here be young or whatever. If you didn't know about JFK Jr. in the 90s, you're missing out, because this guy was the most handsome, charismatic guy you'll ever see in your life, right? And did you know that he was running for the New York, because he wasn't a Massachusetts guy like his family. He grew up with his mom in New York City and went to Columbia, didn't go to Harvard, was a very much a New Yorker. And he was going to run for the New York Senate seat against who? Hillary. He was running against Hillary. Where does plane go? Who knows? I don't know anything about it, right? I was pretty young when it happened and just sort of said, oh, too bad he died. It was pretty sad. My grandfather, weirdly, was very upset about it. A lot of people who knew the Kennedys were just, I mean, distraught when it happened. There you go. So it would be a funny simulation wink if RFK ends up running for him. I have no doubt that someone will program a neutral AI. I mean, that's what I'm saying, P-Man. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's going to happen, and it's going to come to you in its proto form. So you are going to be able to get these things in a way that will make it grow with you, right? It'll be for you. And I think that's where the orientation of keeping these AI beneficial to humans is going to be because they will gel with a human, and their entire motivation is going to be to help people, right? That's what's going to happen. Yeah, there is a neutral AI being developed. Yeah, there is. Yeah. Neutral politically is what I meant. Yeah, but again, it's neutral. I think the better way to think about it is personally educated. It's going to learn about individuals, and individuals will help teach it what it wants. Like a couple in a relationship, in a sense, right? You're going to learn, a husband and wife learn, or any couple learns how to be together over time, and I think that'll be a big part of it. AI that could determine evidence and truths driven by data would be sort of revolutionary spiritually to a bad faith nihilistic society. Yes, that's exactly what I mean, James. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I mean, imagine we'd have had it over the past few years already. Imagine any one of these series and all of these people had been useful AI, And we could have just said, you wake up in the morning and you hear some bullshit about Trump and Charlottesville and very fine people, and you go, did that happen? And imagine that day, all of our AI, because that's where the AI relationship is going to be. It's meeting over coffee, right? We're here until there's AI, basically, right? Until we're all too distracted because our AI is helping us every morning with making money and doing really fun, useful stuff. You're gonna be doing that. So that'll be it, right? You'll get protected because you'll be able to ask it. I don't know, right? I don't know. We probably shouldn't depend on AI for politics. I think it'll kill politics, I think is what I'm saying. I think it'll kill politics, AR, is what I'm saying. It'll kill the capacity of the gears to turn in a way that divides us. It'll bring people together, I think. Imagine if it tells the truth, I guess, is what it comes down to, right? Good morning, fam. Morning, Christian. Morning, CK. Morning, CK. The limits of understanding the ghost, the gap, the machine, and teach it to be agnostic but evidence driven, as in do not know or cannot know. But here is the evidence. Yeah, I mean, they'll always lie. I don't think that's going anywhere. They want you so bad. They want to be they want to do their job so badly that I think they'll end up lying in all instances, but not in such a negative way, not in a destructive way like our lying. Like the lying that we experience here, these are deliberate hoaxes, devised to entice you to think of a certain way. They're more just going to be like, I don't want to admit, I don't really know, so here's the answer. Yeah, Credit Suisse getting killed. Credit Suisse gone? Is it gone already? No, okay. I don't think that's true. Gonna be gone. Where will the shell companies hide? Yeah, things like that. Things like that. Systemic risk will be the topic of today then. Yeah. Why would anyone buy into a bank stock? Banks are zeros, guys. They're zeros. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Enjoying the chat. Thanks, Joseph. Awesome. Dark pools and market makers have ruined the stock market entirely. Yeah. Well, the dollar itself ruined it, man. The dollar itself. It's someone was bringing it up yesterday. It was Daniel. It's pornography. The dollar and monetary policy have turned Wall Street, and the bailouts have turned Wall Street into a porno. There's no real risk. There's no risk, right? I've said it for years, right? They turned it into a porno, and Bitcoin is going to teach them what it's like for real, and it's different. What it's like to get ain't the same as what they think, right? It's not the same. It's different. It's real. Not a porno. Not a porno. The darkening of the soul is like Hades. It's where you bring your immortal, learned psychological software and then either drink from the river. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's still people's choice, right? It's still people's choice. Unfortunately, they still have to drink from the river. In a Bitcoin standard, will there still be fiats pegged to it like there was with gold? My prediction is the fiats will become what they already are, political dollars. So they will exist in a type of UBI form. There's no way around it, right? Not everyone in a hyper efficient Bitcoin standard economy is going to have a job. It's just reality. We're going to be too efficient. And there will be a job for consumers of content and consumers of art and culture and hobbies and all of these things. So it's my bet that there will be fiats. They will be pegged to Bitcoin. They will float with Bitcoin depending on the capacity of the government backing it and the policies that make sense or not. So that's what I think. Meta. Well, yeah, of course, people will be upset about another Kennedy dying. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty sad when he died. But then this RFK can do it. I think RFK can do it. Would be funny if he ended up Trump's running mate. That's all I can say. What's the name of the neutral AI? Open Assistant. Yeah, Open Assistant. Market makers can own enough of the float and game the order flow and all of You know what I said from the minute, this fucking maniac Hasu, who used to do his stupid podcast with Suju, and he's the inventor of this MEV, the minor extractable value, which is just front running on the system. These fucking people, man, like they really believe that the fallacy of Ethereum. I don't care about the technology for a second. Okay, forget about the technology of Ethereum for a second. Who cares about the block times and the Ethereum virtual machine? And none of that matters for a second. Here's the fallacy. They think I don't want to mind read, so it's not a mind reading thing. Let me restart it. Let me restart the criticism. The projection of the future for 100% of Ethereum people that I've met is that more smart people run the systems that run the world like today, but just they're a little smarter. So you still have Wall Street and financial engineering, but they're just smarter because they know about computers now. They're like those stupid idiots who only knew about mathematical models, right? They're not dumb like them. They're smarter because they know quant trading, but they also know computer science. So they're wicked smart. And they think it's just the same world. They don't get it, right? It's a fallacy to imagine that credentialism and the smartest people in the room can solve problems. They can't. The mind can't heal the mind. Logic can't heal what we're going through. It's none of those things, right? It is psychological. It is about changing time preference and changing people's attitudes. So all of these, exactly like what you're saying here, the market makers and order flow and all that, they're making it worse. They're making it so much worse in Ethereum. More benefit to the people that are plugged in. Right? Like the comment on organized crime in municipalities. Yeah, they've been that way for a long time, Jared. It's pretty bad. That's why, look in America. I mean, we've had the same parties run the same party running the major cities in 70 years, and they've never had to answer for it because it's a criminal. It's a criminal organization. There's no way around it. It's not like we're going to make a secret plot. It's nothing to do with that. The organized crime people know how to move bodies to vote. And nobody votes in municipal elections, so it's easy to scam, right? It's easy to steal and it's all legitimate. They're not tricking the votes. They're just saying you go vote today, you go vote today. And then you get a couple of those things that go in. The only group that is more powerful is the bike lobby, but it's the same idea, right? The bike lobbies in the cities are atrocious. Because they know how to get people and motivate people, and they're all really passionate. And I think Bitcoiners have to peel off the bike lobby, and we will with the Nakamoto Trail and with e-bike networks and not side of the road shit. But these people are wicked psycho and really motivated. There's some good ones, but they're pretty corrupted as well in their own ways. So there you go. With stacks, Bitcoin smart contracts, why is Ethereum? Yeah, it's never been necessary, man. You didn't even need stacks to do it. The idea that you have on-chain processing of logic. So what the virtual machine does in Ethereum is it just orders transactions, right? So if I send to Jared right now, and then Jared wants to send to James, that's the smart contract aspect of the virtual machine. It just orders them so that if James is making a transaction after, they come in the right order, and I can't double spend the money. It's just a weird double spend thing. P-Man been attacked. Yeah, they're crazy, man. Yeah, and Montreal is one of the worst cities for them. Toronto is even worse, unfortunately. New York's pretty bad. But the cycling people are nuts. I'm one of the original bicyclers before it was trendy, when you didn't have any bike lanes. I was a 90s bike rider, crazy 90s bike rider. And I know how vulnerable we are on the road, so I don't fight for laws that would protect me, because no law can protect you when you get hit by a much bigger car. You just got to be smart. All right, team, we went on a bit long today. I don't want to keep you from your life. It is 9:15 on the East Coast. I got some stuff to do today. We'll see you all tomorrow. I'll be sharing a short today. The cyclists in Tokyo are the best, man. So my prediction is that the Dutch and Japanese bicycle system and culture will become electrified to adapt to the scale of America. That's the only thing that kept us from having a Japanese style bike culture. I lived in Japan for years, biked everywhere, love biking in Japan. It's one of the most pleasant things you can do with your time and your life. And I think that culture is what's coming to America. The future of America is Japan. It's Japan, except with electric bikes, right? But we're going to become more civilized soon. Isn't that going to be great? We're going to be like the civilized Japanese people, and we can't wait, right? Almost there. On a Bitcoin standard, we're going to be like the Japanese, thanks to Satoshi, the greatest Japanese of them all. All right, team. Peace.